What's happening, guys? Super special guest joining us here in our midweek edition of the Born Offside show. It's Hal Robson-Kanu tuning in all the way from the UK. Hal, where are you joining us from?
I'm currently joining you from London, more specifically Barnes in London. So
Right.
yeah, it's a beautiful day here. Obviously heading into summertime in the UK, which is nice. So we're beginning to get some breakthroughs of sun, which I suppose you guys are used to down under. So.
We are used to. You can probably tell by what I'm wearing, though. Winter's hit pretty early here and it's nice and cold. I'm in Sydney, which hasn't been too bad compared to Melbourne and the rest, but we are feeling a bit of a cold snap. So I know what life's like for you guys. But yeah, most of the time, plenty of sun over here. Mate, I was very excited to get you on the pod today because, as you know, we are a long way away, but your football that you've played is very global. So the Premier League, the Championship, even League One, League Two, we're all excited for the playoffs. We've seen your career, but Aussie fans are probably wondering, where are you now? Because we last saw you playing for West Brom in the Premier League, and then we didn't hear from Hal Robson-Kanu after that. What's been keeping you busy?
Yeah, so I finished playing my last game in professional football was in the Premier League for West Bromwich Albion against Leeds. I happened to score in that goal, which was a nice little fact for me. But yeah, it was my last professional game, and that was in 2021, so 2 years ago now. And yeah, essentially, I had set up a business, health drinks business called the Turmeric Co. And we'd, experienced a lot of growth, and I was actually running it alongside playing professional football. And then, during that period as well, I had a young family, so had 3 kids in total, and so I just kind of had to make a decision in terms of my time and where I invested my attention. And there's only a finite amount, there's not a finite amount of hours in the day, and so yeah, it's one of those things where I just made the decision to focus more on my family and focus more on the business. And having had a career for over 17 years at the sort of top levels of the English game, I was was pleased to move in a different direction.
Is that something that's pretty common from footballers in the Premier League? Because we hear about the crazy salaries in the Premier League and how much footballers earn. Do many of them, embrace other forms of income or look at starting a business, or is it mainly just football until the day they retire?
No, I think definitely of old it would be very much football. But I think the modern day footballer now, the modern day athlete is has a diverse range of interests. There's great examples of athletes who have other passions, other commitments in their life, and they do that while playing at a very high and competitive level. Don't get me wrong, I think to be successful in anything, you have to be fully committed to that profession or to that skill set. But actually, when you have the opportunity, and in my case, physically I was being demanded upon as a professional athlete in the Premier League on a daily basis, but mentally, you'd finish training at 1 p.m. and you'd have the whole day to, sort of obviously rest physically, but from a mental perspective, there was capacity there to, to put that to work and put that into interests that were passionate to me. And so, a lot of professional footballers, they'll play sort of FIFA from, sort of 1 p.m. in the afternoon till 2 a.m. in the morning. However, I, chose to sort of build a business and focus my passions there, and ultimately the business itself, which will obviously I'm sure we'll touch upon, it's very much a health focused business. So it's a product range which is really changing people's lives through inflammation, but with natural ingredients. And we've done some phenomenal work over the last 2 years. We've just published our first clinical trial on the impact that the product has on the reduction of inflammation in the blood. And yeah, given that a lot of ailments and a lot of dis-ease in the world is due to inflammation, being able to reduce that naturally for us is something really unique, and why we're so passionate about what we do.
Yeah, right. I actually do want to talk a lot about that. But so does that mean you used to get slapped up by the lads in FIFA, though, by the sounds of it? So while you were off doing great things, you were never very good at that, were you?
Yeah, to be honest, like thankfully I spent from the age of probably 8 years old till the age of 19, 20 playing FIFA,
Okay.
12 hours a day pretty much. So you get to a base level where, you're just hard to beat. So even now I'd back myself against the most avid FIFA players and say that, yeah, I'll be difficult to beat if at all possible.
I want to see that in action. Maybe we can fire that one up. But let's talk about that. We are going to talk about your career and how it all came to be and your time at Arsenal and all the rest. But for now, let's talk about Turmeric Co. Because you also, like most footballers, like most athletes, you had some darker days through injuries and that. Was that the main spark for you to move into this healthcare? Where did the inspiration come from?
Yeah, exactly that, Claude. And I think, like, looking back, as a 15-year-old, I suffered a major knee injury, which I required surgery for. And I was out of, the game for 12 months. And as a teenager, these are formative years of your sort of development. Physically, you're developing, obviously growing technically, tactically, with the ball, you're competing at a higher level, beginning to train with potentially first team players, reserve team players, and preparing yourself to go into professional football. And so, I missed out on that completely. And coming back after 12 months, I then suffered the same cruciate knee ligament injury and then required a subsequent surgery again. And so I went for a period of effectively not kicking a ball for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And after the second surgery, the surgeon and the physio, basically said, look, we don't think you're going to be able to play without pain or restriction in your knee again. And, it's probably best that you begin looking at a different career path. Right. But my dream, as young as I can remember, was always to play in the Premier League. I wanted to become a professional footballer. I wanted to realize those dreams. So I was like, no, I'm going to come back. I'm going to, give it this my best shot. And so went through the surgeries, went through the rehabilitation. And after 2.5 years of rehabilitation, I began playing and training again. However, exactly what the surgeon and the physios said, happened. I would go for a run and my knee would just balloon. It would take me 15 minutes in the morning just to get enough, range and flexion in my knee because of the stiffness and obviously, the inflammation and trauma it had experienced from these surgeries. And so I was between a bit of a rock and a hard place. And the physios at the time were like, look, we kind of told you this was going to be the case. You either get on with it or look at doing something different, because that was the reality. Yeah. And so, but the physios then said, look, that you can take these anti-inflammatories and these painkillers, which will sort of take the edge off the pain that you're experiencing and might allow you to, play with a little less restriction. So I began taking these, drugs, which were, ibuprofen, diclofenac, paracetamol, almost like Smarties over a 2-week period. And my body just had an adverse reaction to them, so I started passing blood in my urine, had severe nausea, couldn't sleep. And so after all of the trauma I was experiencing, I was then going through this, this opportunity to reduce the pain by causing more trauma to my body. And I was just like, look, it's just not, this isn't the way it should be. And so I remember, breaking down, and my dad was at mine at the time, and I was 17 years of age at Reading Football Club. And broke down and said, look, there must be a way to recover naturally, from the pain and inflammation I'm experiencing. And so at that point, we basically went on a research binge and we began looking at, various different cultures, various different practices, whether it was Ayurvedic practices, ancient Asian practices around, nutrition and the impact that it has on inflammation and pain. Right. And what reduces that consistently. And so we began identifying these natural ingredients, which were relatively readily accessible. So things such as watermelon, things such as pineapple, things such as pomegranate, things such as ginger, and then subsequently things such as turmeric. But it was all about consuming it in its rawest format. So it wasn't about taking it in a pill, in a capsule, in a tablet. It was about having it in a blend of its natural form, but also in a bioavailable format, adding things like black pepper to it, adding things like a fat soluble, such as a flax or an olive oil. And so, over a very short space of time, we gathered all of this information, and my dad basically began creating this blend, sourcing the ingredients, and then creating this blend. And yeah, long story short, after a couple of weeks of iterations, he created this golden elixir, which he would make after, every few days and leave them in my fridge. and I would just sort of take them 2 or 3 of these a day. And I immediately noticed a boost in my energy, simply because I was, nutrient deficient generally, because my diet consisted of, baked beans, plain chicken, and white pasta. That's all I
Yeah.
ever ate.
Yeah.
So, being nutrient deficient, having this, golden elixir with all of these functional macro, micronutrients in and compounds, it immediately had a positive boost to my energy. But, it didn't take any edge off immediately. But it was after, essentially 6 weeks of using this blend consistently, 2, 3 times a day, every single day, that, my usual routine is wake up, roll out of bed, head into the bathroom, into the shower. But it was in that shower at that moment in time that I realized that was the first time in over 2.5 years I had woken up without any pain or restriction in my knee.
Wow.
And so it was a massive light bulb moment for me. From that moment on, I was able to then begin to go and play pain-free. After a year, I then made my first team debut. A year later, I made my international debut. And a year after that, I made my Premier League debut, with Reading when we won promotion. And so it effectively became the secret weapon for me, and I used it throughout my career. Yeah. We began giving it to friends and family, etc. Began giving it to teammates, and eventually, in sort of 2016, we decided to, bring this product, this homemade recipe and remedy, to market, and we eventually launched the Turmeric Co in 2018, and it's really, since launch, we've just sort of gone from strength to strength, and servicing more and more people, everyday people who are looking to naturally reduce pain and inflammation, naturally lead an energetic life, and ultimately, live a life, of freedom, and as optimized as possible. So
it's an incredible story. That's an unbelievable story. So I get what you did there, though. Very clever. How you found this secret ingredient. You thought, I'm going to keep this to myself so that I can bang in all these goals and play at the highest. Then when I'm finished, I'll tell everyone else about it so everyone else can join me. And I love it. Mate, as someone that's gone through a lot of that myself, similar ACL problems, but also a hip resurfacing quite young. So inflammation's been a big issue for me. This product, I've heard about it through you, but I haven't seen it anywhere here in Australia. Is there a plan to bring it all the way here?
Yeah, so I think like the biggest thing for us is, we obviously launched the Turmeric Co, and we have our unique blend and range. And, you could go into like a Pret or like an M&S.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of what stores you might have over in Australia, but you will see like turmeric or ginger shots on the shelf.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you actually look at them and spin the bottle and look at the ingredients, you'll see that they're made up mainly of an apple juice, an orange juice, or a water. Right. And then the actual functional ingredient, i.e. the turmeric or the ginger, or even something like an ashwagandha, is like less than a percentage. Right. But then the format in which it is like a turmeric powder or turmeric liquid, which is actually water combined with turmeric and has been highly processed already.
So you're left with 0.00000% of turmeric.
Literally, yeah. Right. So it's quite insane, and we obviously only realize this now because we're in the market and we're delivering such a high quality product. But for us, like, we manufacture our own product, and I haven't gone into detail, and I'll save the details for another time. But we basically built a manufacturing facility in order for us to deliver this high quality product to consumers, to people in all different walks of life. Right. There's no one else in Europe or in the UK that we could find that could have made it for us. Everyone refused, in terms of like the big juice beverage, functional beverage manufacturers. They all process pre-processed juices, mix them, combine it with a little sprinkle of, the functional name of an ingredient, which is effectively like flour, because it's been, compromised and processed so much. There's zero nutritional benefit, but it's marketed as a functional shot. So for us, like, the biggest thing is the product itself. And so we make it fresh. Right. And so for us, when we're looking at, expansion, looking at internationalization, 100%, we know that Australia, as an example, would be a massive market for us, super health aware, super health conscious, really attuned with their bodies, understanding, the importance of nutrition when it comes to health. And so for us to make that step, we have to maintain the level of quality of the product.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're looking at it in terms of internationalization, but we're not going to launch into into a new country if we cannot deliver that same level of expertise that we deliver in our manufacture process within that market as well. So yeah, it's something definitely in the pipeline, but we're going to take our time to make sure when we do deliver it, it's impacting customers exactly the same way as it's impacting customers in the UK.
You know what, Hal? I've been rejected a few times in my life. That's the best rejection I've ever heard. That is absolutely brilliant. You'd be great at breakups. That was fantastic information. Maybe I have to come all the way over there and grab myself a box or something and bring it back. I've got a solution for you. It's only been 2 years since we've seen you play on the professional level, and I've been hearing rumors, and maybe they're just bullshit rumors. You can tell me. I've been hearing rumors that you may come out of retirement and play for Wrexham. Now, a lot of people have been linked for Wrexham. If that's the case, I'm saying forget that. Forget playing in the ice cold in the UK 9-10 months a year. Don't worry about that. You come to the A-League where you only have to play 27 games. Did you ever play with Adam Lafondra? You would have.
I did, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
He's having a great time.
So,
He sits out half the season injured, and then he pops up for finals time, scores a few goals. He's loving life over here. Did you ever consider playing abroad?
Yeah, I did, and there's been a few clubs from Australia previously who were looking for my services, but yeah, I think no, it is everything that I've heard about playing in the A-League is phenomenal. The way of life, culture, obviously the weather. Everyone has had only positive things to say about it. Like you said, the likes of Adam Lafondra, even the likes of Simon Cox, who played in the Premier League, and had a stint out there as well. But yeah, I think I'm not sure if there's a big enough pool. Maybe distribution of the tournament code could persuade me.
That's right.
Yeah, get
right.
onto the club owners. Yeah.
I'll talk to him. If there's the front of shirt sponsorship along with a position on the team sheet, then I think maybe we can start talking at that. I'll have a word with some important people for you, mate. But let's talk about your career from day one, because a lot of young footballers listen to this podcast, and I want to talk about your experience, because in and amongst all those injuries that you just mentioned, there was also a shift from an Arsenal youth system to Reading, where you got your breakthrough through a man that we all know now, Brendan Rodgers, who at the time was the academy manager there. Tell me about being a young footballer in England. It must be so competitive. How often do players get dropped from bigger clubs, not know where to go? Did you always know you were going to be a professional footballer? Were there those moments of doubt besides the injury, just because maybe one coach thought you weren't big enough or weren't good enough?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question and a really good point. I joined Arsenal as a 10-year-old. Can you imagine joining a professional outfit as a 10-year-old? You arrive, you get everything given to you, kit given, boots given, you get, every other week there's fresh balls, on the pitches. So it was a complete, it was an eye-opener to sort of what the elite standard is. And so I stayed at Arsenal from 10 to 15 within their schoolboy system, was playing and training with them, 4 or 5 days a week, mostly in the evenings during the midweek. But then as you get older, they'll then take you out of school for half days. So, 2 days of the week at school when I was 13 and 14, I would finish a half day and then get picked up, driven to the Arsenal training ground, and then train, play, watch games. And it was it was an incredible grounding for me, but when you get to 15, all of a sudden it's everyone remembers, and I remember because I think I was 14 around at the time when Wayne Rooney broke onto the scene and scored that incredible goal against Arsenal for Everton as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
So then you begin to see and realize that actually, okay, well, the objective here is to play in the first team and to begin to have a professional career. And so that mind shift and that expectation all of a sudden creates pressures and creates, ultimately, and it creates an environment where there's a level of expectation around you. You're not just playing football to have fun anymore. You're not just playing football because you love it. You're playing football because, well, you're trying to have a professional career. You're trying to become a footballer. And I think that shift impacts a lot of young professionals, and whether they're boys or girls, like in a negative manner,
Right.
because you lose that enjoyment of the game. It then
Yeah.
becomes an obligation where, as a matter of fact, it is actually a privilege. So something that, I was able to then incorporate as I grew older was that really acknowledging at all times that this is a massive privilege. Like, this isn't work. This is like fun, and I'm going to enjoy every single moment of it,
Yeah.
even in the big games where there's a lot of pressure and a lot of expectation. And mentally, you have to be extremely strong to do that, because people's jobs are on the line, whether you
Yeah.
win or whether you lose. If you're promoted or if you're relegated, like, you are impacting a lot of people. You're then impacting yourself. If you want to earn that new contract, if you want to get that move, if you want to play in the Premier League, if you want to get picked at an international level, all of a sudden, again, all of these expectations try and like creep their way into the psychology and the psyche of a relatively young individual. So being able to really be steadfast and say, look, like, I know that there are expectations in how, this opportunity is perceived, but actually I'm not interested in that. Like, I'm very aware that I just want to enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and I'm going to give my best. And if I give my best, then the rest will really take care of itself. And so, yeah, back to your, original point, as a 15-year-old, all of a sudden, you're getting told you're not big enough, you're not strong enough, you're not quick enough. And for me personally, obviously, I hadn't gone through a growth spurt. I hadn't developed physically. I was a late developer. That was a massive setback. So it's not always a case of, okay, yeah, I know I'm going to become a professional footballer.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going to happen. But what you can say is, like, I'm determined to make this happen, and I'm going to give absolutely everything that I can give to achieve my dreams. And having that mentality, like that resilience, to then build into your philosophy, just relentless persistence and perseverance. Like, that's what differentiates between having a career, not having a career, and then again differentiates between having a career and having a successful career at the highest level. Like, it's the levels of that willingness and that, that psychology around, your approach to what it is that you're looking to do. I think, like, winding it all back, like, where does that come from? I think it just comes from, like, really truly having a passion. Like, if you love playing football, or you love playing, cricket or golf or tennis or whatever it is, or you love reading books, or you love studying, whatever it is, like, just be so passionate about it. And just like really live and breathe that, and the rest truly, it really does like take care of itself.
Yeah, no, definitely. I rate that. For you though, like, you tell me about that story. That was 2003, 2004. That was less than 20 years ago. And to hear that a club like Arsenal, who was already under the guidance of Arsene Wenger and would consider a player too small at that level, and that's the reasoning. Is that still happening in the Premier League today? Because you think the Premier League now, with the cities now and that type of system, and Newcastle's new system, and all these big clubs that are European giants and exposed to the best players in the world, would change their mentality. But are you still seeing great players go missing into the distance because they're not big enough?
I think it's definitely become less of a thing, particularly
Okay.
with obviously the rise of, football has developed in terms of, the philosophies around, the manipulation of the ball, before football and generally sports was physically reliant, so
Yeah.
you had to really be physically competitive.
Mm.
On the flip side, again, you have to be like robust. You have to be an athlete
Yeah.
to become a professional footballer, particularly in this day and age. It's
Right.
even more competitive. The tempo is even, higher than what it was.
Mm.
But in terms of, like, this is more a case of, like, the infrastructure for nurturing players.
Right.
And that has definitely changed. And I think, stories such as mine, obviously stories such as Harry Kane was obviously let go from Arsenal as well. He was a chubby little kid. They didn't think he could be, compete at a high level. There's great examples of that now. And I think that nurturing of players to allow them time to develop is definitely in a better place. But that being said, all of these coaches, all of these managers, they're all under pressure as well, even in the
Yeah.
academy system, to deliver players. So if you've got two players who are at 14 or 15 years of age, exactly the same technically, so technically they're both the same, but one player at 15 is, can do 100 meters in 11.5, and another player at 15 can do 100 meters at 12.5. They're always going to pick that player at 11.5. And that's not to say in 2 or 3 years' time, the player who was doing it in 12.5 can now do it in sub 11, right?
Yeah,
so it's like, you don't know that, but at the same time, because of the pressures and the expectations, it forces, people and coaches to make these decisions.
We did get the news here, and we actually spoke about it here on Born Offside about Crystal Palace, I believe it was last year, became one of the first clubs to officially put a 3-year plan to keep working with the players that they drop from their academy system and make sure that they land on their feet either at another club or in something else, which is great to hear. And with the amount of money flowing into a league like the Premier League, you expect that from these clubs. But then you get the fascinating stories like Mpanzu, who's playing for Luton Town. He may become the first player to go from the Conference, League 2, League 1, Championship, and now Premier League with the same club. I wanted to talk to you about the playoff weekend because we know it's a big deal over there in the UK. Everyone goes to Wembley for these 3 massive matches. You've been involved in heartbreak around that time of the season. You've also been involved in a promotion to the Premier League. What's your tip in that game with Coventry taking on Luton?
Yes, it's a massive game, and also the fact that we're saying next season in the Premier League either Coventry or Luton is going to be a Premier League club is really crazy. But we've seen it before. The likes of Blackpool, the likes of when Brighton rose through the ranks. Most recently, the likes of Brentford, who've really risen through the ranks as well. And I think when you look at these clubs, the clubs that any club and any organization really, but any football club, their success is always driven by the direction from the ownership. So if the owners of a club really have a vision, have a clear objective, and then understand their identity and how they want to get there, like they can invest into that. And what that affords is it affords time to the people within that environment because they trust in the process, they trust in what they're creating. Whereas when you have ownership, and you see this at the very highest level of sport, where they don't really have an identity, they're just searching for something, and they don't really know what it is that they're looking for. The turnover of managers, the turnover of players, the turnover of styles for a football club just becomes relentless. And that breeds inconsistency, which ultimately is the opposite of how you generate success. So I think these games are massive because so much is riding on them. I think, when I played in these games, I think that it was worth, 100 million. Now it's worth 150 million. I don't know the latest stats. I'd be surprised if it will be close to 200 million. So it's like these are massive, massive games for clubs, and they're also massive games for the players. And I think as a player, these games will ultimately define your careers. So if you get promoted to the Premier League, like that's a massive change. Like a lot of these players, you'll double your salary. You'll be playing against, at the very highest level. You can call yourself a Premier League player. You can test yourself at the very highest game. You're creating opportunities for you to progress in your career. If you have a fantastic season, for the next 12 months, you could end up moving to a Premier League, an established Premier League team. So it's super, super exciting. And as much as we've said, all of the pressures and expectations which we've spoken about there, like as much as those are really prevalent, like I think again, like just go and enjoy it, like just embrace the opportunity. It's because it's not easy getting to there in the first place.
Exactly. Enjoy it. You don't know when it's going to happen again. So either way, we've got a fairy tale on our hands with whoever goes up to the Premier League from that game. And it's the same in League 1 and in League 2. I need to ask you a few questions from the other 2 members of the show, of the podcast, who couldn't be here. We got OLANTEKKERS and Kat Haddad gave me a few questions they wanted me to ask you. And the first one is about a team which was promoted a fair bit down the ranks. We mentioned them earlier, Wrexham. They're up into the Football League. They've got a great following over there. And I think since that promotion, every second or third Welsh player is being linked to the move to Wrexham. Is Gareth Bale going to come out of retirement? Is there any truth to the rumours about Hal Robson-Kanu? Has there been any communication between you and the club?
Yeah, so I think like from that perspective, where I was basically like tipping my hat to Wrexham and saying, look, like if they were serious about bringing a player like a former player of the Premier League to Wrexham, I would actually consider it, because I think a lot of clubs, as I was talking about, direction and having that philosophy and having that belief, like what they've created and done at Wrexham over the last few years in such a short space of time is phenomenal. But in order to continue doing that, like, you need to keep building, and I'm sure they have plans in place for that. So from my perspective, obviously I'm super busy, and I've got real clear defined focuses on what I'm trying to do. But something like a Wrexham would certainly be considered from me, is what I would say. But yeah, I think there's obviously a big planning phase in any promotion and in any off season. But yeah, I obviously wish the club all the best and want to see them continue to go from strength to strength, which I'm sure they will do.
It's a proper Hollywood story. And another man who was linked with a move there for about 24 hours until he shut it down on social media was Gareth Bale. For me, an incredible player that I got to watch here. You're obviously playing for Real Madrid and got to go over and see him play live once back in the day as well. But playing with him for Wales must have been brilliant. I want to ask you, though, this was another question we had. Who for you is the best Welsh player ever?
Oh, best Welsh player ever. Wow. Yeah, I think I would say, in terms of obviously what he's achieved, and the impact that he had on the nation, like, without doubt, Gareth Bale has done something which I don't think another Welsh player will do again,
Right.
certainly in our generation.
Mm.
And so for that, you have to give it to Gareth Bale. But actually, from my perspective, there were some incredible greats, in the history of Wales,
Yeah.
going back to the likes of Ryan Giggs, the likes of Mark Hughes. Obviously, there are there's some incredible players, and more recently the likes of Joe Allen and Aaron Ramsey, who were always in sort of Bale's shadow, but actually
Yeah.
within themselves they were top players. So yeah, it's definitely been a golden generation, and I think for Wales now, hopefully it's given the nation that foundation to actually continue to deliver that level of talent and continue to compete, because that's the objective. And what would it be now? Maybe close to 15 years ago, it was the objective was to set a new standard for Wales as a national team, and show that as a nation, we can compete at any level,
Yeah.
and obviously on an international tournament level basis. And yeah, I think having qualified out of 3 of the last 4 major tournaments now, I think that precedent's been set. So yeah, hopefully the aim is for that to continue, and for more success in the nation to be achieved.
That's awesome. You guys just seem like always such a close-knit group. Even from the team photos before the game always make me laugh as well, and they're just so weird and wacky. And I know you guys plan something like that. I want to talk to you about that Euro run. Sometimes I think about myself, right? Like I do a lot of things when I'm working. I produce, I present, I create shows, I run a business, I do all these things. And every now and then I bump into people and they're like, saw that TikTok you made, because I made a series of TikToks that went viral. So, oh, yeah, you're the guy, you're the TikTok guy. I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm the TikTok guy. Do you ever get sick of being asked about that turn at Euro 2016? Because it's a phenomenal goal, and it was up for the Puskas that year, and it's something that I feel as though you'd be proud of and want to talk about forever. But anytime, if I Google your name, it comes up with that Cruyff turn at the 2016 Euros. Do you ever get sick of people not asking you about the rest?
No, but this is the beauty of football, right? Like, it has those moments which really define players, define careers. And for me, that was a career defining moment, without doubt. What it meant. I think it was obviously at the time, the magnitude of that goal was significant. Quarterfinals. I think we were up against. I think Belgium were ranked number 1 in the world at
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
So it's like it's just a crazy sort of story. And yeah, it was. Yeah, so based on that, like, I don't I understand football and the impact that it has on people. And,
Yeah.
I think that was a moment which was, so unique.
Is your favourite goal ever that you scored?
Yeah, I'd say, I've scored, obviously, you scored my first Premier League goal against Tottenham is something I'll never forget. Obviously, internationally, had those great moments. Scored earlier in the tournament, so my first, major tournament career goal. But yeah, I think as a sort of, moment that you're never going to forget, it's obviously, it was insane. It was incredible.
Huge run for you guys all the way to the semi-final and went down to the eventual champions. It was an incredible run. Hopefully we see Wales making those runs deep into tournaments for many, many more years to come. I did want to ask you, though, before I let you go, I did get a bit of a... You're fantastic. I can see you're a great business owner. You're a great politician. I did want to get a couple predictions for the games coming up this weekend. The first one, Coventry, taking on Luton. Who's winning that game, Hal?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, as I said, both teams have done phenomenally well to get there. But I fancy Luton, and
Yeah.
I think both teams will fully deserve it, and both teams could win. But I just think Luton might have a little bit too much for Coventry, and they're also one of our partners,
Right.
as well.
So they got players that are taking that?
Yeah, their whole club uses the Turmerico shots. Yeah.
Right, that's massive. Okay, I've got a new reason to root for them in this game then as well. That's huge. I also did want to ask you, I think you played with a couple of Aussies in your career. You played with Adam Federici down at Reading. You also played with Ben Foster, who's playing over at Wrexham. Best goalkeeper you played with in your career?
Oh, best goalkeeper. Yeah, I played with a few, like sort of Wayne Hennessy was phenomenal. Obviously Ben Foster, like super class. Adam Federici again, he was a top goalkeeper.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. I'd have to go Wayne Hennessy. I think at the time I reckon he could have gone into any top four team in Europe. But he was a top goalie.
Brilliant. I'll make sure Adam's not listening to this one. No, but I know he scored that famous goal for back in, I think it was for Reading, a famous goal that he scored as well to keep you guys either in the league or it was for a promotion as well. It does love to pop up for a late corner, Adam, as well. Last one I do want to ask you is, as a forward, you would have played against the Brutes in the Championship, in the Premier League, and at international level. Who was the defender that just gave you the most nightmares, was just a nightmare to play against?
Yeah, I'd probably say 100% Virgil van Dijk is, probably the toughest,
Really?
player that I played against defensive wise, just because physically, normally like if you come up against a defender, you might be able to physically bully them. You might be able to, think quicker than them so you can, sort of get half a yard, a little bit of quick play. But he just has everything. So, he'd be able to, he's quicker than you, stronger than you. He reads the game better than you, so it's like a tough opponent. That being said, I did put one in the top corner against Southampton when he was playing there. But yeah, no, it's he's up there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's an absolute specimen, isn't he? And he's come back quite well from that ACL injury as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the turmeric co as well. Big Virgil van Dijk. Hal, an absolute pleasure to catch up with you, mate. I can't wait to get over there and try this for myself, even if that's before you bring it to Australia. It was great to chat with a legend of the game. And hopefully we do see you lacing up the boots somewhere soon, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Top man, Claudes. Thank you very much. Cheers.